Do you believe in life after death? One man says he has scientific proof it is true. Dr. Jeffrey Long, a radiation oncologist from Louisiana, has written a book with his findings. He calls it Evidence of the Afterlife. Mary Jo Rapini says that she had a near-death experience that profoundly changed her life, and her story is featured in the doctor's book. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Doctor, if I can start with you. You collected more than 1,000 stories of near-death experiences from people all around the world, and you say the consistencies in those stories help prove scientifically that there is an afterlife. So based on your data, what is the proof?
Well, my research reveals 9 lines of evidence about the reality of near-death experiences and their consistent message of an afterlife.
Can you give me an example of some of those 9 lines of evidence?
Well, one good line of evidence is that those that are blind, including blind from birth, can have visual near-death experiences, not as fragments, but as fully visual impressions during their near-death experiences, just like visual impressions during other near-death experiences.
And no matter what the age of the person, it doesn't matter, the experience is the same, essentially?
My research involved a study of young children age 5 and under, and I found the content of their near-death experiences absolutely identical to older children and adults, suggesting that whether you know about near-death experiences, what your cultural upbringing is, what your awareness of death is, doesn't seem to have any effect on the content of the near-death experience.
Well, Mary Jo, you claim that you had a near-death experience.
Yes.
You suffered an aneurysm at a gym. When was this?
It was in April '03.
And you were taken to the hospital, and what happened?
Well, for 3 days they couldn't locate the aneurysm, so basically they put me in an ICU and were just monitoring me. And then one night, the third night, I got very ill. And I remember they were all of a sudden rushing around me and inserting things into me and monitors. And they called my husband, and he was there, and I looked up and I saw this light. It wasn't a normal light, it was different, it was a luminescent, and it grew. I kept looking at it like, what is that? And then it grew large and I went into it. And I went through this tunnel and I came into this room that was just beautiful. And God held me. He called me by name. And he told me, he said, Mary Jo, you can't stay.
And I understand you wanted to stay.
I wanted to stay. I protested. I said, I can't stay. Why not? And I started talking about all the reasons. I was a good wife. I was a good mother. I did 24-hour care with cancer patients. And he said, let me ask you one thing. Have you ever loved another the way you've been loved here? And I said, no, it's impossible. I'm a human. And then it just held me, and it said, you can do better.
Were you a skeptic before this about
Yes.
this? You were?
Yes, I was working with cancer patients prior to this happening. I was getting ready to move to Houston. I was probably at the lowest point in any faith. I had seen terrible things in that cancer center, people dying, and when I would go in and they would tell me they saw things, I would respond. I would just sit there, and they would say, can you see them? And I'd say, no, I can't see them. Then I would leave the room and tell the resident, you better check their morphine level.
You know, Doctor, let me ask you, because, and I totally respect what you're saying, Mary Jo, and I don't doubt that you experienced what you said you did, but there is such a thing as a sort of cultural conditioning. We've all at this point heard the story about you go through the tunnel, there's the light, you meet God or whatever you want to call that force, and you're told that it's not your time. So how do you know that Mary Jo wasn't just kind of experiencing that? Maybe she was on certain drugs in the hospital?
Well, out of 1,300 near-death experiences that I've studied, Mary Jo's experience is absolutely typical of what people describe. I think if near-death experiences were culturally determined, then people that had never heard of near-death experiences would have a different experience. But we're not finding that. Whether you know or don't know about near-death experience, the time it happens has no effect on whether the experience happens or not, or what the content is.
All right, Doctor, I appreciate it very much, Mary Jo, as well, for your time. Pretty controversial book. It's going to get a lot of people talking. And the book, again, is called The Evidence of the Afterlife. Dr. Jeffrey Long and Mary Jo Rapini.